When someone you care about uses their bare hands to slice out your heart and then looks you in the eye without even realizing what they've done, do you know how it feels? That realization that you are nothing to the person you gave up everything for. It took me 57 years to really comprehend what it meant to be invisible in your own life. If you read this tale through to the conclusion, you'll see why sometimes the only way to educate someone how valuable you are is to demonstrate to them what happens when you're not there to catch them when they fall. Remember to remark where you're watching from and subscribe to the channel. My name is Anderson Brooke. My entire identity, until 6 months ago, could be summed up in terms of other people: Carol, Dylan's ex-wife, Charles's mother, and Tiny Amy's grandma. Never simply Brooke, a woman with her own goals, abilities, and aspirations. That's what happens when you dedicate 30 years of your life to elevating others. Being buried beneath everything, you become the foundation, essential but invisible, that supports it all. I'm sitting in my Portland condo tonight, watching the rain patter against my window while I recall the precise moment my life began to divide into before and after. But you must know what happened before in order to really comprehend that moment, why it pierced so deeply, and why what occurred after was unavoidable. At the age of 23, I got married to Dylan and sacrificed my last year of my journalism degree to help him with his medical residency. As he kissed my forehead, he murmured, "You can always go back. This is just temporary." After 15 years and 2 kids, the temporary had solidified into the permanent. While he developed his career as a cardiologist, I typed his research papers, planned his professional activities, kept track of our social schedule, and reared our kids. I gave Carol everything I had when she was born. She reminded me of everything I had always aspired to be: perceptive, tenacious, and fiercely intelligent. She was bright from the beginning. Carol demanded attention, but Charles, who arrived 3 years later, was more reserved and sensitive. In our house, Charles was a kinder presence. Carol was 17, and Charles was 14 when they got divorced. Dylan departed for a pharmaceutical representative who was 15 years my junior. Being thrown away with such a cliched writing nearly stung more than the betrayal. Dylan said, "You'll be fine, Al," as he packed his belongings. "You're good at taking care of everything." It sounded like a compliment from him. That was my punishment, and I took it. I obtained a job as an administrative assistant at a nearby event planning firm after selling our family home and moving into a tiny apartment. Although work was uninteresting, it provided flexible hours and covered the bills, allowing me to continue being there for the children. By that point, Carol was already turning away, feeling ashamed of our diminished situation, and upset that I couldn't give her the same standard of living to which she had been used. She'd murmur, "Dad wouldn't have let this happen. When supper wasn't as complicated as it used to be? When did her allowance for clothes decrease? When we had to leave her pals behind and relocate to a new neighborhood?" Those remarks were like bitter pills that I swallowed. How could I respond? That we were deserted by her father? That I was giving it my all? Rather, in order to get my degree, I increased my workload, took on weekend jobs, and began attending night school. Carol received a partial scholarship at Stanford, and I had to spend all of my little resources to make up the difference. She pleaded, "Mom, please don't come to Parents' Weekend," when she was a sophomore. "They're staying at the Four Seasons, and Dad is just bringing Kristen. Given your circumstances, it would be uncomfortable to have you there." My predicament, as if being working class and divorced were infectious. I went nonetheless, slept at a cheap hotel 40 minutes from college, and attended Carol's economics department reception, sitting 3 seats behind Dylan and his new bride. I stood patiently on the sidelines while she presented them to her lecturers. She didn't even bother to introduce myself. My daughter's embarrassment of me caused me to cry for the first and last time as I drove back to my motel room. Charles was unique. Following the divorce, he suffered, losing confidence in his grades. Carol refused to see how much he needed me. Having at least one child who still wanted me around made me feel awful when he chose a nearby community college. However, even Charles soon distanced himself from his mother, relocating to Seattle for a computer career after college, and beginning a life that left less and less time for frequent phone conversations. By the time I was 55, I had completed my communications degree, advanced to the position of senior event planner at Marshall & Hayes Event Solutions, and come to terms with the fact that I was just a minor part of my kid's life. Although it wasn't what I had hoped for, it was sufficient. I had my volunteer job at the literacy center, my book club, and my little group of pals. From the shreds that remained, I had built a life. Then came the promotion. Janet Hayes, the co-founder of the company, called me into her office on a rainy Tuesday in October. "Brooke, Thomas is retiring next month," she said, referring to our director of operations. "I heard 30 years with the company is impressive." "It is, and finding his replacement has been our top priority." She slid a folder across her desk. "We'd like that replacement to be you." I stared at her, certain I'd misheard. "But there are several managers with more seniority." "Seniority isn't what we need. We need someone who understands every aspect of this business from the ground up. Someone with impeccable attention to detail, crisis management skills, and the respect of our entire team." She smiled. The board vote was unanimous. The folder contained my new contract, Director of Global Operations, a salary more than triple what I was currently making, full benefits, profit sharing, a travel allowance. "We're expanding," Janet continued, "opening offices in London and Singapore next year. The Tech Conference Management Division is growing faster than we anticipated. We need someone who can standardize our operations across all markets." My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. "This means overseeing Tech Vision?" I asked, referring to the prestigious annual technology conference our company had recently acquired the management contract for. "Yes, this year's event in San Francisco will be your first major project in the new role. 6,000 attendees, over 200 speakers, 40 countries represented." She leaned forward. "Brooke, I've watched you solve impossible problems for 15 years without ever seeking credit. It's time you stepped into the spotlight." The spotlight, a foreign concept after decades in the shadows. I accepted the position on the spot. That night, I called both my children to share my news. Charles answered, his voice distracted, the sound of his office in the background. "That's great, Mom. Really great. Hey, can I call you back? We're in the middle of a server crisis." He never called back. Carol's reaction was worse. "Oh, wow. So, you'll be like an executive assistant to the whole company now." "No, Carol. I'll be the director. I'll be overseeing all operational aspects of every event the company handles globally." The skepticism in her voice was unmistakable. "That sounds like a lot for you to take on. Are you sure you're qualified?" I felt something crack inside me. A hairline fracture in the foundation of maternal tolerance I'd built over decades. "Actually, I am," I said, my voice cooler than intended. "The board seems to think so anyway. Well, good luck with it. Oh, speaking of events, Charles and I are planning something for Thanksgiving at his place in Seattle. Dad and Kristen might come, too. We'll send you details. No invitation, just details. As if my attendance was an operational challenge rather than a familial inclusion. Thanksgiving arrived 3 weeks later. I flew to Seattle, rented a car, and brought an expensive bottle of wine and homemade cranberry relish to Charles's sleek downtown apartment. Carol had flown in from New York, where she now worked as a financial analyst. Dylan and Kristen had canceled at the last minute, a professional commitment they couldn't reschedule. The evening started pleasantly enough. Charles's apartment overlooked the water, the Seattle skyline glittering against the night sky. He'd become an accomplished cook, preparing a turkey that would have made any culinary school proud. Carol brought her new boyfriend, James, handsome, Harvard Business School, old money from Boston. I noticed the way she touched his arm when she laughed, the way she monitored his reactions to her family, seeking approval. I recognized it because I'd done the same with her father decades earlier. The conversation flowed around work, politics, Charles's recent promotion, Carol and James' plans to move in together. I spoke about my new position, the challenges of restructuring the operations department, my upcoming trip to London to meet with our new team there. Carol's expression shifted subtly. "Mom, don't take this the wrong way, but aren't you worried about being overwhelmed? I mean, international business is complicated. There are cultural differences, time zone issues." "I'm aware," I replied, taking a sip of wine. "That's why we're implementing a new project management system to streamline communication across offices." She exchanged a glance with James. "It's just, in finance, we see this all the time. Companies promoting people beyond their experience level to meet diversity quotas. Age diversity is the new trend. The table fell silent. Charles stared at his plate. I assure you, I said carefully, my promotion had nothing to do with my age. Carol leaned forward, her voice taking on the placating tone one might use with a child. Mom, I'm just concerned. You've spent years organizing small local events. TechVision is massive. The tech industry moves so fast, and frankly, it's a young person's game. Carol, Charles warned softly. She ignored him. I just don't want to see you fail publicly. Maybe you should consider delegating the tech conference to someone more connected to that world. I placed my fork down slowly. I appreciate your concern, but I'm quite capable of handling my professional responsibilities. The conversation shifted, but something had changed in the air. As we moved to the living room for coffee, I overheard Carol in the kitchen with James. She doesn't get it, she murmured. She's going to embarrass herself. She can barely figure out her iPhone. And now she's supposedly running a global tech conference. I stood frozen in the hallway, my back pressed against the wall. James's voice was lower. Maybe she'll surprise you. Carol laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound that cut through me. Please. My mother has been invisible her entire life. This is some midlife crisis where she's pretending she can suddenly be important. Some people are just born to be invisible. She needs to accept that before she humiliates herself. I stepped into the kitchen then, my face a careful mask. Carol's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of uncertainty about how much I'd heard. I simply gave her a faint smile and swallowed my pain, as I had done countless times before. But something was different this time. As I stood there watching my daughter exchange uncomfortable glances with her boyfriend, I felt something crystallize within me, hard and sharp and irrevocable. There would be no more smiling through the pain, no more accepting the role they had assigned me, no more invisibility. And in 3 months' time at the TechVision conference in San Francisco, my daughter would learn exactly what happens when you underestimate the woman who gave you life. I didn't confront Carol that night. I finished my coffee, complimented Charles on dinner, and excused myself early, claiming jet lag. The truth was, I couldn't bear to be in the same room with either of them anymore. The facade had cracked, and I feared what might escape if I stayed. Back in my hotel room, I lay awake until dawn. Carol's words played on repeat in my mind. Some people are just born to be invisible. Born to be invisible, as if my decades of self-sacrifice, of putting everyone else first, had been some kind of genetic predestination rather than a conscious choice I'd made out of love. The next morning, I canceled my return flight and booked a suite at the Four Seasons instead. I needed time to think, to strategize. I sent a brief text to Charles thanking him for dinner and explaining that a work emergency required me to fly directly to San Francisco. It wasn't completely a lie. I did have meetings scheduled there the following week. I was simply accelerating the timeline. I spent the next 3 days in near total isolation, venturing out only for meals and short walks along the waterfront. Something fundamental had shifted inside me. The pain of Carol's words had calcified into something harder, colder. I reviewed every sacrifice I'd made, every dream I deferred, every slight I'd endured with a smile. The balance sheet of my life showed a profound deficit. I had given everything and received precious little in return. By the time I boarded my flight to San Francisco, I had made a decision. I would no longer be the supportive mother who silently accepted scraps of attention. I would no longer pretend that their dismissal didn't wound me. I would no longer be invisible. The TechVision conference was scheduled for February, 3 months away. I threw myself into the preparations with a focus that surprised even Janet. "Brooke, these proposals are brilliant," she said during our weekly meeting. The structural changes to the speaker tracks, the networking innovations, the new mobile app features. It's like you've been thinking about this for years. I have, I replied simply, though not in the way she imagined. 4 years, I'd watched from the sidelines as others received recognition for ideas I'd contributed to anonymously. I'd ghostwritten speeches, troubleshot crises, and engineered solutions while someone else took the credit. I'd become an expert in making other people look good. Now, I would use those same skills to orchestrate my own emergence. The San Francisco office became my second home. I worked 16-hour days reimagining every aspect of the conference. I hired a personal stylist and image consultant, explaining that as the new face of Marshall and Hayes at our flagship event, I needed to project authority and competence. I invested in an entirely new wardrobe. No more blending into the background. I changed my hairstyle, updating my shoulder-length gray to a sleek silver bob that framed my face in a way that demanded attention rather than deflected it. Each night, I returned to my corporate apartment and reviewed the latest conference registrations. I knew Carol would attend. TechVision was the premier networking event for financial technology, and her firm always sent representatives. Sure enough, 3 weeks before the event, her name appeared on the registration list along with 2 colleagues. Perfect. I arranged for Carol's firm to receive VIP passes, ensuring she would be seated in the front row for the opening keynote. I personally reviewed the seating chart, confirming her position relative to the stage. I orchestrated every detail with the precision of a general planning a military campaign. The week before the conference, I flew back to Portland briefly to check on my condo and collect the remaining clothes I'd need. There was a message from Charles on my voicemail. He'd been trying to reach me for weeks. "Mom, is everything okay? You haven't been answering my calls." Carol said, "You've been distant with her, too. We're worried about you." Worried? The word almost made me laugh. They weren't worried about me. They were unsettled by my absence. 4 years, I'd been the steady background presence, always available, never demanding. Now that I'd withdrawn that reliability, they noticed the void. I didn't return Charles's call. 3 days before the conference, I received a text from Carol. "Hey, Mom. Just found out my firm is sending me to TechVision next week. I know you're involved somehow with the planning. Maybe we could grab coffee if you're going to be there. I feel like we haven't really talked since Thanksgiving." I stared at the message for a long time. The old Brooke would have jumped at this olive branch, grateful for any attention from her daughter. The new Brooke recognized it for what it was, an attempt to leverage a personal connection for professional advantage. She'd likely discovered my new role and calculated that having Mom on the inside could benefit her networking efforts. I replied with deliberate casualness, "I will be quite busy with my directorial responsibilities, but I'll check my schedule. Enjoy the conference." Her response came quickly. "Directorial responsibilities? I thought you were on the planning team." I didn't respond. Let her wonder. The morning of the conference, I woke at 5 a.m. Though I hardly needed the alarm, I'd slept fitfully, my mind racing with a strange mix of anticipation and residual pain. The woman who looked back at me from the mirror was someone I barely recognized. Confident, polished, powerful. My stylist had selected a crimson suit with subtle gold accents for the opening day. A deliberate choice that would make me impossible to miss against the sea of tech industry black and gray. I arrived at the Musone Center at 6:30 a.m., 2 hours before the first attendees would begin to arrive. My team was already there, each person precisely briefed on their responsibilities. I walked the floor reviewing the exhibitor setup, the stage design, the lighting, the sound system. Everything was flawless. "Brooke," Janet called, approaching with her hand extended. "The board members just arrived. They're eager to meet with you before the keynote." I smiled. "Of course." In the VIP lounge, I shook hands with men and women whose names appeared on Forbes lists and tech industry publications. They asked questions about my vision for the conference, my thoughts on the future of tech events in a post-pandemic world. I answered with the confidence of someone who had been preparing for this moment her entire career. "I must say, Brooke," said William Brown, the founder of a prominent venture capital firm, "your reputation precedes you. Janet tells me you've reimagined the entire conference framework." "Sometimes," I replied, "the most valuable perspectives come from those who've been observing silently from the sidelines." At 8:30, the doors opened to general attendees. I stationed myself near the main entrance, greeting key industry figures as they arrived. My team had provided me with a detailed brief on each VIP, their companies, recent achievements, and personal interests. I moved from one conversation to the next with practiced ease, storing away useful connections and information. At 9:15, my assistant touched my elbow gently. "Ms. Anderson, we should head to the stage. The keynote begins in 15 minutes. I nodded, making my apologies to the group I was speaking with. As I turned toward the main hall, I caught a glimpse of Carol entering with her colleagues. She hadn't seen me yet. She was dressed in an expensive charcoal suit, her hair pulled back in a sleek ponytail, clearly trying to project an image of professional seriousness beyond her years. I watched her for a moment, This daughter of mine, who thought I was destined for invisibility. She laughed at something her colleague said, that same dismissive laugh I'd heard in Charles's kitchen. The sound of it hardened my resolve. "Everything is ready," my assistant said, handing me a tablet with my notes for the introduction. "Perfect," I replied. "Let's begin." I made my way to the backstage area where Janet and the keynote speaker, the CEO of a leading artificial intelligence company, were waiting. Janet squeezed my arm encouragingly. "You've done an incredible job, Brooke. The place is buzzing." I smiled, a genuine expression of satisfaction. "Thank you. It's time to show everyone what we've built." The lights dimmed in the main hall. The massive screens displayed the conference logo. The moment had arrived. "Ladies and gentlemen," the announcer's voice boomed through the speakers. "Please welcome to the stage the Executive Director of Global Operations for Marshall and Hayes Event Solutions and the architect of this year's Tech Vision Conference, Brooke Anderson." I stepped onto the stage as the spotlight found me, my crimson suit blazing against the blue backdrop. For 1,000 faces turned toward me. And there, in the front row, exactly where I had placed her, sat Carol, her expression transforming from professional interest to confusion to shock in the space of 3 seconds. Our eyes locked across the distance. I smiled directly at her, holding her gaze for one perfect moment before turning to address the crowd. "Welcome to Tech Vision," I began, my voice strong and clear, carrying to every corner of the massive hall where the invisible become visible and the future reveals itself. The next 45 minutes passed in a blur of perfectly executed professional theater. I introduced the keynote speaker with the practiced ease of someone who had been commanding stages her entire life rather than orchestrating from behind the scenes. My voice never wavered. My posture remained impeccable. My gaze swept confidently across the audience, occasionally deliberately landing on Carol's stunned face. When the applause finally died down and the keynote speaker took over, I exited the stage with measured steps. Backstage, Janet and several board members waited to congratulate me. "Magnificent introduction, Brooke," Janet beamed. "You had them eating out of your hand." I accepted their praise with a gracious smile, all the while feeling a cold satisfaction settling in my chest. The expression on Carol's face had been everything I'd hoped for and more. Shock, confusion, and something else. A dawning realization that she had gravely miscalculated. My phone vibrated in my pocket. "Carol!" A text message. "Mom, what is happening? I had no idea you were running this. Why didn't you tell me?" I slipped the phone back into my pocket without responding. Let her wait. Let her wonder. Let her feel for once what it was like to be on the outside looking in. The morning continued according to plan. I moved through the conference hall with purpose, stopping to speak with industry leaders, moderating a panel discussion on the future of event technology, fielding questions from tech journalists who suddenly found the new director of Tech Vision fascinating. At every turn, I felt eyes following me, some admiring, some curious, some calculating. Among them, I knew were Carol's. Shortly before lunch, as I was consulting with my team about an audio issue in one of the breakout rooms, I heard her voice behind me. "Mom!" I turned slowly, deliberately, making her wait those extra seconds. Carol stood there, her professional composure slightly frayed at the edges. Her colleagues hovered uncertainly a few feet away, clearly confused by the "mom" address directed at the woman they just watched command the main stage. "Carol," I said coolly, "I hope you're enjoying the conference." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Why didn't you tell me you were in charge of all this? I had no idea you were." She gestured vaguely at my position, my appearance, the difference my team was showing me. "There are many things you don't know about me," I replied, my voice pleasant but distant. "If you'll excuse me, I need to address an issue with the afternoon sessions." "Wait," she said, reaching for my arm, then thinking better of it. "Can we talk privately? Maybe during the lunch break." I consulted my tablet, scrolling through my meticulously planned schedule. "I'm afraid that's not possible. I have a lunch meeting with the conference sponsors. Perhaps another time." The confusion on her face deepened. This wasn't the mother she knew. The woman who would drop everything at the mere suggestion that her daughter might have time for her. "Tomorrow then," she pressed. "Dinner." I looked up from my tablet, meeting her eyes directly. "I'll check my calendar and let you know." Before she could respond, my assistant approached with urgent information about a speaker who was stuck in traffic. I turned away from Carol without another word, issuing clear instructions to my team about how to adjust the afternoon schedule. When I glanced back a moment later, Carol was still standing there, watching me with an expression I couldn't quite read. For the first time in her adult life, I realized she was really seeing me as someone other than just her mother, as someone with power, authority, and a life completely separate from her. Good. Let her look. Let her wonder. Let her question every assumption she'd ever made about the woman who had given her life. The rest of the day unfolded perfectly. Each session ran smoothly. Each networking event accomplished its goals. Each technological innovation we'd implemented received praise from attendees. I was everywhere and nowhere, solving problems before most people even realized they existed, directing my team with quiet authority, making connections that would benefit Marshall and Hayes for years to come. By evening, the first day of the conference was being hailed on social media as transformative and brilliantly orchestrated. Janet forwarded me an email from the board chair expressing his delight with the event's execution. Success surrounded me like a protective shield. I checked into my suite at the hotel adjacent to the conference center just after 9. My feet ached from standing all day, but the discomfort felt like a badge of honor. I kicked off my heels and poured myself a glass of champagne from the bottle I'd had delivered earlier. A small celebration for a plan perfectly executed. My phone chimed again. 3 missed calls from Carol, 2 from Charles, a flurry of text messages. Carol, Mom, please call me back. We need to talk. Carol, I'm sorry if I said something to upset you at Thanksgiving. Can we please just talk? Charles, Mom, Carol told me what happened at the conference. Why didn't you tell us about your new position? Call me. Carol, I've been trying to reach you all day. I'm in the hotel bar if you want to meet. I sipped my champagne slowly, savoring both its taste and the desperation in their messages. 4 years, I had been the one waiting by the phone, hoping for calls that rarely came, settling for brief, distracted conversations where I was clearly an afterthought in their busy lives. Now the roles were reversed. The last message had come in just 15 minutes ago. Carol was waiting in the bar downstairs, no doubt rehearsing what she would say to me, how she would explain away her cruel words at Thanksgiving. Perhaps she was already calculating how my new position might benefit her career. The thought hardened my resolve. I changed into a simple black dress, reapplied my makeup, and slipped back into my heels. Then I picked up my phone and typed a response. I have dinner plans this evening. Perhaps another time. I sent the message, then turned off my phone completely. I had indeed made dinner plans with William Brown and several other venture capitalists who had expressed interest in expanding our conference model to emerging tech markets in Asia. It was a meeting that could potentially double Marshall and Hayes' global footprint. Carol's contrition would have to wait. As I left my room, I caught my reflection in the mirror by the door. The woman looking back at me was unrecognizable from the one who had sat quietly at Charles's Thanksgiving table, absorbing insults with a patient smile. This woman's eyes were clear and cold, her posture radiating confidence, her expression giving nothing away. I took the private elevator directly to the restaurant on the top floor, bypassing the lobby bar where my daughter waited. As the doors closed, I felt a momentary twinge, not of regret, but of something adjacent to it. A recognition of what was being lost, or perhaps what had been lost long ago. The sensation disappeared as quickly as it had come. The past was the past. I had spent decades prioritizing my children's feelings over my own. Now it was time for them to understand that their actions had consequences. That invisibility was a choice I would no longer make. The elevator doors opened onto the restaurant's elegant foyer. William Brown rose from his seat in the waiting area, extending his hand in greeting. Brooke, we're delighted you could join us. Everyone's been talking about the remarkable work you've done with the conference. I smiled, stepping fully into my power. The day exceeded even my expectations, and I'm confident tomorrow will be even better. As I followed him to the private dining room, I pushed thoughts of Carol waiting below firmly from my mind. My children had taught me an invaluable lesson about priorities. Now it was time to return the favor. Dinner with William and the venture capitalists stretched late into the night. We discussed expansion possibilities, market trends, and strategic partnerships with the easy familiarity of equals. Not once did the conversation turn to family or personal matters. These were people who measured value in capabilities and results, not relationships or histories. It was refreshing. When I finally returned to my suite just after midnight, I turned on my phone to find 7 more missed calls and a dozen text messages. I ignored them all and slept soundly for the first time in months. The second day of the conference dawned bright and clear. I arrived early again, reviewing the agenda with my team, troubleshooting minor issues that had arisen overnight. My assistant handed me a coffee prepared exactly as I liked it, along with the morning schedule. "There's a Carol Anderson who's been trying to get on your calendar," she said. "She's quite persistent. Says she's your daughter." I took a sip of coffee, letting the warmth spread through me before responding. "Yes, she is. Please tell Ms. Anderson that my schedule is completely full today with conference commitments." My assistant nodded, making a note. "Also, there's a message from your son. He's apparently flying in this afternoon and would like to meet you." That caught me by surprise. Charles coming to San Francisco. He hated travel, avoided crowds. For him to fly down on short notice meant Carol had truly unsettled him with her report of our encounter. "Thank you," I said, my voice betraying nothing. "Please let him know I'll be attending the speaker's dinner this evening and will be unavailable until tomorrow at the earliest." The morning proceeded much like the day before. A whirlwind of introductions, presentations, and problem-solving. I was scheduled to deliver closing remarks for the morning session, a short address highlighting the afternoon's events. As I approached the main stage, I saw Carol standing near the stairs, clearly positioned to intercept me. "Mom, we need to talk," she said, her voice low but urgent. "You can't keep avoiding me." I looked at her with cool assessment. The confident financial analyst was gone, replaced by someone more familiar. The petulant child who had always expected the world to bend to her wishes. "I'm not avoiding you, Carol. I'm working." This is what people in leadership positions do. They prioritize their professional responsibilities. "This isn't like you," she said, her frustration evident. "You've never been too busy for family." I smiled thinly. "Perhaps you didn't know me as well as you thought." Before she could respond, I continued past her to the stage. The timing was perfect. My introduction was already playing on the speakers. I ascended the stairs with measured steps, feeling Carol's eyes boring into my back. The lights dimmed slightly as I took my position at the podium. For 1,000 faces looked up at me expectantly. Power hummed through me, a tangible current. It was addictive, this visibility, this respect. "Good morning," I began, my voice carrying confidently across the hall. "I trust you found this morning's sessions as illuminating as I have. Before we break for lunch, I want to highlight some of the exceptional opportunities awaiting you this afternoon." As I spoke, I noticed a commotion at the back of the hall. A familiar figure had entered and was making his way down the side aisle, looking up at me with undisguised shock. Charles. He had arrived earlier than expected. I didn't miss a beat, continuing my address with perfect composure while my son stood frozen at the edge of the crowd, taking in the scene. His supposedly invisible mother commanding the attention of thousands of industry leaders. When I finished speaking, the applause was immediate and enthusiastic. I nodded my acknowledgement, then exited the stage on the opposite side from where both my children now waited. My assistant intercepted me immediately, a tablet in hand. "The afternoon panels are all confirmed," she reported. "And Janet would like a moment to discuss tomorrow's closing keynote adjustments." "Thank you," I replied deliberately loud enough for Carol and Charles to hear as they approached. "Please tell Janet I'll be with her in 5 minutes. I need to handle a personal matter first." I turned to face my children standing side by side now, both wearing expressions of confusion and something that looked almost like hurt. The irony wasn't lost on me. "Charles," I said coolly, "I wasn't expecting you until later." He stared at me, taking in my transformed appearance, my obvious authority in this space. "What is all this?" he asked. "Carol said you were running the conference, but I didn't understand what that meant until now." "I'm the executive director of global operations for Marshall & Hayes," I explained as if to a casual acquaintance. "Tech Vision is our flagship event. I oversee all operational aspects of our conferences worldwide." But he struggled visibly. "When did this happen? Why didn't you tell us?" I did tell you, I corrected him. Last Thanksgiving. Neither of you seemed particularly interested in the details. Carol flinched at the reminder. Mom, that's not fair. I didn't understand, she added. What didn't you understand, Carol? I cut her off, my voice calm but edged with steel. That your mother might actually be capable of something significant. That the woman you dismissed as invisible might have talents and abilities you never bothered to notice. A flash of guilt crossed her face. I didn't mean, she began. You meant exactly what you said. I interrupted again. Some people are born to be invisible. Those were your exact words. You just never imagined those words might have consequences. Charles looked between us, confusion evident. What is she talking about, Becca? Carol's cheeks flushed. It was just a stupid comment. I was stressed about work and you decided to take that stress out on me. I finished for her. As you've both done for years. After all, I was just Mom. Always there, always understanding, always available whenever you deigned to make time for me. My assistant approached discreetly. Miss Anderson, Janet is waiting. I nodded. Please tell my children that they're welcome to attend this afternoon's sessions as my guests. I've arranged VIP passes. I turned back to Carol and Charles. We can continue this conversation another time, perhaps when you've both had a chance to reflect on the relationship dynamics you've taken for granted. I walked away without waiting for their response, my heels clicking authoritatively on the polished floor. Behind me, I heard Charles ask Carol in a low voice, What did you say to her? Good. Let them have that conversation. Let Carol explain herself to her brother. Let them both confront the casual cruelty they'd normalized over years of interaction with me. The rest of the day passed in a productive blur. I avoided my children without being obvious about it. There was no need for petty games of hide and seek. I simply went about my work, moving from one responsibility to the next with purpose and focus. Occasionally, I spotted them in the crowds watching me, trying to reconcile the mother they thought they knew with the professional commanding respect from industry titans. By evening, word had spread through the conference about the family drama unfolding around the event director. I overheard snippets of conversation in the hallways. Her own daughter had no idea. Apparently told her mother she was invisible. Talk about eating your words. I neither confirmed nor denied these rumors. Let people talk. Let the story spread. Public humiliation was the least of what Carol deserved after years of dismissal and disrespect. The speaker's dinner that night was held in a private room at an exclusive restaurant overlooking the bay. 60 of the tech industry's most influential leaders gathered to network and discuss the day's events. I circulated among them with easy confidence, facilitating introductions, nurturing potential partnerships for Marshall and Hayes. Midway through the evening, as I was engaged in conversation with the CEO of a prominent software company, my phone vibrated with a text message. I glanced at it discreetly. Mom, we're in the hotel lobby. Please meet us when you're done. We need to talk. Charles. I slipped the phone back into my pocket without responding. They would wait or they wouldn't. Either way, I would no longer structure my life around their convenience. As I raised my glass for the evening's toast, I caught my reflection in the window. The woman looking back at me was powerful, respected, visible. The satisfaction of that reality outweighed any lingering maternal instinct to smooth things over, to forgive without accountability, to return to the comfortable invisibility of being just Mom. That woman was gone, and she wasn't coming back. The final day of Tech Vision dawned with a sense of impending culmination. Not just for the conference, but for the reckoning I had set in motion. As I dressed in my most striking outfit yet, a tailored cobalt blue suit that my stylist had assured me projected both authority and memorability, I felt a curious sense of calm. Whatever happened next, I had already won the most important battle. I would never again allow myself to be rendered invisible. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Charles and 1 from Carol, all from after I'd returned to my room last night. I had deliberately not gone to the hotel lobby where they waited. Let them experience what it felt like to be an afterthought, a meeting that could be indefinitely postponed without explanation or apology. The closing day of the conference was always the most challenging. Attendees were tired, beginning to think about flights home, less engaged than on previous days. But we had planned for this, structured the final sessions to be the most dynamic, save some of our most impressive speakers for last. The energy in the main hall was palpable as I took the stage for my opening remarks. As we enter the final day of Tech Vision, I began. I invite you to reflect not just on the technologies we've explored, but on the connections we formed. In this industry, visibility is currency. Those who are seen, those who are heard, they shape the future. Those who remain in the shadows, who accept invisibility. I paused, making brief eye contact with Carol in the third row. They surrender their power to others. The synchronicity was almost too perfect. As I finished my address and the audience applauded, Janet approached me with an excited gleam in her eye. "Brooke, I've just had confirmation. Sophia Reyes wants to meet with you." Sophia Reyes, the legendary tech CEO whose company had revolutionized financial transaction security. She rarely attended conferences, let alone requested meetings with event organizers. "She specifically asked for you," Janet continued. "Said she was impressed with how you've transformed Tech Vision. She's considering partnering with us for her company's developer conference next year." I nodded, maintaining my composure, though my heart raced. "I'll make time for her immediately. Where would she like to meet?" Her team suggested lunch in her private suite. I took the liberty of clearing your schedule. As I made notes of the meeting details, I spotted Carol making her way toward the stage. The determined set of her jaw told me she wouldn't be put off again. "Fine. It was time we had this conversation anyway." "Mom," she said as she reached me, her voice tight with suppressed emotion. "We need to talk now. Charles's flight leaves this afternoon." I regarded her coolly. "I have a meeting with Sophia Reyes at noon that I cannot reschedule." Carol's eyes widened slightly at the name. Of course, she would recognize it. Reyes's company was a major player in Carol's financial technology sphere. "I can spare 20 minutes before then," I continued. "My office is this way." I led her to the conference center's executive suite that had been assigned to me for the duration of the event. Charles was already waiting inside, pacing nervously. He stopped when he saw me, his expression a complex mix of confusion, hurt, and something that looked almost like pride. "Mom," he said quietly, "what's going on with you?" I closed the door behind us and moved to stand behind the desk, maintaining the physical positioning of authority. "I would think that's obvious by now. I'm doing my job extremely well as it happens." "This isn't about the job," Carol interjected. "It's about how you've been treating us since Thanksgiving, ignoring our calls, avoiding us here at the conference." "Ah," I said, sitting down and gesturing for them to do the same. "So, it's unpleasant to be treated as an inconvenience, to have your attempts at connection rebuffed, to be made to feel invisible." Charles winced. "Carol told me what she said at Thanksgiving. It was cruel and thoughtless. But is this really necessary? This revenge?" I raised an eyebrow. "Revenge? Is that what you think this is? What else would you call it?" Carol asked, her voice rising slightly. "You orchestrated this entire situation to humiliate me. You made sure I'd be here to see you on stage. You've been parading around in front of my colleagues, making me look like a fool who doesn't even know her own mother." "I didn't make you look like anything," I countered calmly. "You did that yourself with years of dismissive behavior. I simply stopped protecting you from the consequences of your actions." "It was one comment," she protested. "No," I said, my voice hardening. "It was the culmination of a pattern that has defined our relationship for years. Both of you have treated me as an accessory to your lives, available when convenient, forgotten when not. You've taken my support for granted while offering little in return." Charles looked down at his hands. "That's not entirely fair, Mom, is it?" I leaned forward. "When was the last time either of you called just to check on me? Asked about my hopes, my dreams, my work? When did you last treat me as a person with a life beyond being your mother?" The silence that followed was answer enough. "What you're seeing now," I continued, "is not revenge. It's consequence. It's what happens when I stop arranging my existence around your convenience and start prioritizing my own value." Carol's eyes filled with tears of frustration or genuine remorse. I couldn't tell. "So what now? You just cut us out of your life completely." "I haven't cut you out of anything," I replied. "I've simply stopped cutting pieces of myself away to fit into the narrow space you've allocated for me in your lives." My phone chimed with a reminder about the meeting with Sophia Reyes. I glanced at it, then back at my children. "I have to go. This meeting could represent a significant opportunity for my company. More important than family? Charles asked quietly. The question hung in the air between us. 6 months ago, I would have automatically deferred to their needs, canceled the meeting, and spent hours reassuring them that nothing was more important than they were. But that woman was gone in this moment. Yes, I answered honestly. Just as your careers, your partners, your priorities have often been more important than maintaining a meaningful relationship with me. I stood, gathering my tablet and notes. I suggest you both use the flight home to reflect on the kind of relationship you actually want with me. Not the convenient one you've settled for, but one built on mutual respect and genuine interest. When you figure that out, I'll be here, not waiting in the wings of your lives, but standing center stage in my own. Carol stood too, her professional composure reasserting itself. And if we decide we want to rebuild to do better, then you'll need to prove it with actions, not apologies, I said simply. Words are easy, Carol. You of all people should know that. I moved toward the door, pausing with my hand on the handle. I've arranged for car service to take you to the airport, Charles. The driver will be waiting in the main lobby at 2 o'clock. He scowled. How did you know my flight time? I'm your mother, I answered, letting a small grin creep in. I may have changed, but I still pay attention. I left them in my office and proceeded to speak with Sophia Reyes, taking deliberate measures. The assumption that I would always be accommodating, always bend, and always put their demands ahead of my own had eased the weight that had been on me for decades. Something stronger and lighter took its place. The assurance that I would never again let myself be devalued for the sake of another person's comfort. 3 days later, I was back at my condo in Portland when Carol wrote me a handwritten note. There was an excerpt from a publication for the financial sector that highlighted Brooke Anderson's brilliant leadership of TechVision. Carol had added in her own handwriting at the bottom of the piece, I was incorrect. You were never invisible. I simply wasn't paying enough attention. There was no apology. It was an acknowledgement, but not really. The beginning of something fresh, maybe. Without replying, I put the clipping on my desk. To regain my trust, time, and attention, they would have to do a lot more than this. My phone rang. Janet is phoning regarding the prospective collaboration with Sophia Reyes' business. I looked at the picture on my bookshelf as I responded. Charles's arm over Carol's shoulder at her college graduation, me standing a little apart, my grin unwavering and ready to be included. I would hold on to that picture as a reminder of my former self and a pledge to myself that I would never again become into that lady. I said, Janet, averting my gaze from the past, I have looked at the plan, yes. We can do much better, in my opinion. This is what I recommend. The shadow-dwelling woman, who had come to terms with her fate of invisibility, was gone forever. She was replaced by someone who had at last mastered the most crucial lesson of all. Self-awareness is the first step towards being noticed. And my vision had never been clearer.